So, could you briefly explain the Korean sponsorship issues in that scene, and for those who may not have seen your comments on that matter before?
Well, from what I've heard, and bear in mind I base all of this information on what I've heard from various players at various events, the problem with the Korean scene at the moment is that it doesn't have a core base within the within the country of Korea itself. And this may change as the Pro League gets more popular and Kesper start to push greater into the field and Brood War fans start to come over to StarCraft 2. But the issue is that you've got Korean sponsors that are not willing to sponsor Korean teams because there isn't enough return on investment for them. Because those Korean sponsors, they're no use within the Western scene because they don't sell their products to Westerners. So you've got a very limited selection of companies that would actually be willing to get involved, and even less that are relevant to the demographic. Then you've also got the problem that when it comes to sponsoring Korean teams, Western sponsors won't necessarily do it because you don't have a huge Western fan base that is really wanting to watch Korean players stream or Korean players get involved in tournaments outside of the GSL. People don't necessarily watch the GSL for whoever's playing. Obviously, you'll get a spike if a really popular player like Nesty, MMA, MVP, MC, if those guys are making big runs, then yeah, people will watch. But most of the time, the guys that watch the GSL, they watch it because the skill level is high and not because of the teams that are playing. So the sponsors aren't actually getting that brand awareness and ROI that you would expect from the Western audience that foreign teams are getting in spades, which is why, of course, teams like EG are so rich. They get so much ROI on the sponsorship. So I think that what has to happen is you've got to be able to bring more Western sponsors into the Korean scene, and you've also, wherever possible, got to be able to grow the Korean audience to the point where Korean sponsors also want to put a lot of money in. And that's currently not happening.
This is a test of the emergency broadcast system. This is a test of the emergency broadcast system.
Oops. All right, there we go. Sorry about that. So I apologize for something else immediately. So I managed to hit my XSplit record or stop record hotkey in the middle of the interview because I'm just incompetent at some points in time. So I actually cut out a good bit of the interview that was I messed up. So I do not have his direct words like I obviously have in the rest of this interview, obviously near his voice, but I can give you the salient talking points that he went through. The question that I missed out on for the most part was his general idea in forming a team, Team Cynical, perhaps in Korea. So let me just bring up those talking points really briefly. Where did I put them? Here they are. Okay, so here's what we've got. So John's wife Jenna is mostly responsible for the team formation process. She is very passionate about the Korean scene after their MLG experience with Crank, and she's actively looking into finding sponsors and making other arrangements to see if teams can work. So yeah, she is the main force behind it. It's kind of her project. TotalBiscuit did say that because I mean he doesn't have a whole lot of time, and she actually just has the passion there. She really, really, really wants to help with the Korean scene in a number of ways. Secondly, there would be a small core of 2 to 3 players initially. The Cynical Bird organization wants to start small and build up over time, which makes sense. I mean, they're not like a huge organization. It's really hard to kind of like just break in immediately in Korea with a big roster. It'd be very, very, very tough to do, especially as a new organization getting into the team idea. Like they don't really have experience in this other than some minor personal sponsorship stuff. With that in mind, there would be a focus on a very strong sponsorship core. The team needs funds to provide room and board, travel to tournaments, and a fair salary for any and all of their players. So for that, they need strong Western or Korean sponsors. It'll likely be Western, because it'll be obviously TotalBiscuit is a much better network in the foreigner scene as far as contacting sponsors and such things goes. So expect a couple of Western sponsors to really be covering the cost of this team. Following up on that note, many players on Korean StarCraft 2 teams do not get paid a salary. They only receive the room and board and a place to train with equally skilled players, but that's actually it. The only money they actually get is prize money, which really drives some of them to succeed and probably explains why Korean players are as good as they are for the most part, because they have to win or they don't get money. But that's what TotalBiscuit's looking to kind of solve bit by bit with 1 to 2 players at a time. We'll provide that fair salary with this team if it does come together. And to close that up, Team Cynical is still very much in a conceptual stage, very conceptual. So do not be surprised if it does not end up forming, at least not very soon. And if it does, it will still take some time. We don't really know when to expect it. It all depends on when sponsorship things go through and other arrangements, and we just don't know how long it's going to take. And TotalBiscuit made that very clear. So we don't know what to expect quite yet, but they're definitely working very, very hard. Jenna in particular is working very hard to try and make this happen. So I mean, if that passion can very well turn into something great. So yeah, just don't be surprised either way. This could really go in any way, shape, or form. But I mean, look forward to, we'll obviously try to. I mean, TotalBiscuit will let you guys know via Twitter or however, be it YouTube, exactly what's going on when he probably has more details. Right now, everything's just kind of being worked out, and it's hard. There's a lot of stuff to do to try and build a team. It's no small feat. So I think that's about that. And I will let you get back to the interview in just about a second here. But once again, I want to apologize for cutting out this part of the interview. I did cover it, though not in TotalBiscuit's smooth and silky voice of brilliance. The rest of the interview is quite good. I can assure you of that. And I apologize for this brief delay. And now we can go back. No, that's not the right one. There we go. My MS Paint overlays are back. I did not have time to contact a friend to make these for me. I did them myself. But anyway, back to your regularly scheduled programming, the interview, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of it. Thank you guys for watching. Okay, so the other thing you said, this was not quite as recent, but still pretty recent, you mentioned when you first brought up the sponsorship issue is shifting the Shoutcraft invitationals that you do over to a Korean focus to try and bring awareness to the sponsorship thing there. But have you had any progress with organizing that, confirmed players, potential dates, anything like that?
Yeah, over the next couple of months, I think it's actually going to be easier because, again, some of these teams are not going to be around anymore, and there are going to be a lot more free agents who have a lot more flexibility. Right now, the main problem is that a lot of teams just don't let their players compete in some of these tournaments because they're too busy focusing on GSL or they're focusing on Pro League. So I think that over the next few months, it will be easier to do that. It's also a case of just getting contacts on the ground. And now we have contacts on the ground and we're able to do a lot more through both players and people that we know over in Korea. So our first attempt to do this just didn't work out and it fizzled. It never happened. I think the second attempt will probably work out much better. So I'm looking forward to trying to put an event on like that over the next few months. But obviously organizing a Korean event is significantly more difficult. And since we're doing an invitational, actually is more difficult than you might think. If we did a standard qualification-based tournament, then people would probably just come and play in it. And it would be fine. But doing an invitational and getting specific players that we know will be really entertaining, well, that's a different matter entirely. And it's difficult enough just getting them from Western teams, let alone teams that don't speak your language. So I think our translator is going to be having a work cut out for in the next few months.
Yeah. Actually, you mentioned you said it's kind of harder doing things in the Korean scene. Have you encountered any organizational difficulties? Like, I mean, the language barrier is obviously one, but like anything that's really kind of hampered what you're trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, just flat out stonewalling from a lot of organizations. I don't want to name specific teams, but there have been several teams that are just flat out stonewalled and said no. Like, we'll even ask for just, can you send a player to this event? No. Like, we're not interested, or either they'll just not respond to you, and it's really weird, honestly. It's very difficult to deal with the Korean scene from an outsider standpoint, and we're hardly the first people to struggle with it. There are groups that have a great deal of experience with this, like FXO, for instance, has a lot of experience. Quantic has a lot of experience, and even EG is getting a lot more experience dealing with the Korean scene. And I think it's just a gradual process. And when you do it on your own and you don't have all of this support and staff in Korea to do it, it does become very, very difficult. And you do run into big problems, which is why I think it's helpful to us that we helped out a Korean player. And that actually gave us a lot of credibility within the scene. We heard a lot. Like, the Korean StarCraft pros know about what we did. In fact, we even heard that some of them were quite jealous of it. So, they actually view what we did for Crank as a very positive kind of, not so much an olive branch, but just saying, hey, we do actually care about the Korean scene. And I think that heartened a lot of people. So that may have broken the ice a little bit with certain organizations. So we'll see how that helps going forward.
Yeah. And obviously, you probably can't speak too much into this because of confidentiality and stuff. But like you said, like teams going to be folding up pretty soon. Like, how big a names are we talking here?
We're talking big names.
Okay,
there is at least one very big name that might surprise you. That's what I can say. That's the knowledge I have. I'm not going to reveal their name very obviously, but I think you're probably going to see some pretty shocking things over the next few months. And then I have to wonder how much the Kesper teams are actually going to then cannibalize that, and how many players are going to be eaten up either by foreign teams who are looking for top Korean talent, or by Kesper teams who are looking for either coaches or people that are already competent with StarCraft 2.
Yeah. Okay, and when pulling all of this together, what drives you personally to really try and make a difference in all of the Korean sponsorship stuff? Like a personal motivation, I guess. It's not like I don't know the best way to phrase that, but you kind of see what I'm trying to get at.
It was just our experience with Crank, I think, that really pushed us into that. I mean, we learned a lot from him and a lot from the other Koreans as well. Because we brought Crank over, a lot of Koreans were willing to come and talk to us at the event, so we heard a lot of different things. And as a result, I got a much better impression of the Korean scene than I had previously. You know, they pretty much spilled their guts, you know, either through a translator or just by talking to us. I mean, I think you'd be kind of surprised by how good the English of a lot of those guys actually is. They're really smart. So, you know, you've got guys that are already going to university and are just blindingly intelligent, far, far smarter than I'll ever be. And, you know, they're willing to talk about this stuff. And as a result, you know, I realized, this is the biggest thing that I realized. Foreigners have it easy in comparison. Foreigners can actually get paid a salary and yet produce no results, as long as they get decent stream numbers, or they just happen to be someone that's outspoken on the forums and gets a lot of attention. That can't happen in Korea because of the language barrier. And the Korean fan base isn't that large, so it's really hard to become notorious in Korea. You've got to be notorious in the Western scene. The only way you can do that is by performing, and there's so much talent over there that distinguishing yourself is very difficult, whereas distinguishing yourself over here is very easy. You don't have to do it via personal skill. So it just seemed to me that it's like, wow, there's this entire scene and there's so much talent, and there's kids who are working their asses off to be the best that they can be, and they're seeing no support. They're in a really hostile environment, and the only support they ever seem to get is when Western teams swoop in and pluck the talent out, and then, you know, have them as their next latest and greatest star. And that just, I don't see that as being helpful. And I don't feel that Western money, aside from FXO, of course, you know, and they've done a fantastic job in that respect, and what Quantic's done with IM and then StarTale, I don't think Western organizations and Western personalities, Western money has really helped the Korean scene as much as it should have.
Yeah, how do I want to formulate this? So we have all these kind of smaller teams kind of swooping in, obviously picking up bigger names, like not even small name teams, but like MTW getting Supernova, and then there are random teams like Alt Tab grabbing Sage, and then all these little individual teams. Do you think they actually really gain a whole lot from grabbing these individual Korean names?
Well, they gain the ability to win tournaments, which they didn't have previously. And I think that's perhaps the most important thing. You know, I love Demaga to death, but he hasn't won a tournament in a little while. So, you know, MTW, I think they only had Demaga for a while, didn't they?
Yeah, that was
really
fairly recent change.
Yeah, so it makes perfect sense for them to bring a Korean on. The thing about Koreans is that you can pick up a Korean quite cheaply. It sounds terrible to say this. It's like you're going in and buying a handbag. No, you can pick up a Korean player quite cheaply, because at the end of the day, they weren't getting paid anything while they were in Korea at all on their team. They weren't getting paid a thing. So you've got a very talented player that can bust up online tournaments. You got a very talented player that can place highly in MLGs, IPLs, IEMs, and DreamHacks, and you're investing not a particularly large amount in them. You also get a foothold in the Korean scene by owning a Korean player on your team. So you can use that player to wedge open more opportunities in Korea. So it makes perfect sense to pick up a Koreans. I mean, they're just in general higher skilled than foreigners, and they cost less. They have lower expectations. So I can't really blame any team for picking up Korean talent at this stage, and it's not a bad thing either. It's really helping out a lot of Korean pros that couldn't otherwise actually afford to stay in the game and would otherwise be forced to just retire.
Yeah. All right. Kind of a shift over here, but I'm going to talk about your wife's role in all of this, actually. I had the pleasure of interviewing her recently, and that was actually a good that was just a great interview. But she's doing a lot in this. She does a lot of the organization. You said the team is kind of her project right now as
It
well.
is her project. Yeah.
Yeah, how is having her like back, not like in your life, obviously you had the reunion in the States recently, but like having her around with all this organizational stuff, like how does that feel to have her back doing that and helping out so much with the organization?
It's pretty crazy. I mean, I've worked for years with my wife on other projects. We worked together on WoW Radio, and it was actually one of the most successful periods that we had in the actual fan site itself. And then we worked on a whole bunch of other stuff, and now we work on my videos, my business, and my brand. But we also work on StarCraft stuff, and she's got a passion for the Korean scene now, because she was, consider I was off casting at MLG Rally. She was around the Koreans all the time. That's where she was. She and her Sophie, the translator that we hired for that event, they were hanging around with the Koreans all the time. She was watching every single game. She was getting to know the Koreans, and she gained an understanding of the Korean scene, and also gained a real passion for it and wanted to help. So she has organizational skills that are far beyond anything I can do, and also has more time than I do. So is working diligently to try and create a team of some description. I mean, it's been something we've wanted to do for a while, but it didn't seem feasible, and it still almost doesn't. It's almost out of reach. But we have a lot of guys that have come forward and said we want to help, and we have a lot more connections than I think a lot of other teams really have. We have a media network that blows every other team out of the water simply by virtue of having youtube.com/cynicalbrit and /TotalBiscuit and the Twitch channel. There is no other team that has a YouTube channel with 775,000 subscribers, not even close. Mm-hmm. So we can leverage that perhaps to gain other opportunities and sponsors that other teams can't actually get their hands on. So she's going to try and do that, because her specialty really is in marketing and building the brand. And she's been building this brand to the size that it is for the last few years, and has been greatly successful with that. So that's a knowledge that she can apply to the team.
All right. I'm going to switch over to some kind of like random, just kind of like personal kind of questions. But do you have any other last comments you want to make that I may not have touched on this topic in particular?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say that, this is very much a thing that's in concept. The whole tweet thing blew up after I said, wow, the state of the Korean scene is just, this is really bad. And if I could get the sponsors, then I will, Mm-hmm. So this is, and then that ended up on Reddit, and I felt compelled to actually speak about it, because otherwise the rumors were just going to go crazy. And what I said on Reddit was accurate. We are looking into it. If we can get the sponsors, we will do it. And that's the stage that it's currently at. Everything else is just negotiation and trying to build. And this may not even happen. We may find that sponsors are completely tapped out. We can't get the avenues we need. We can't raise the funds. And at the end of the day, I still have a family to support and a business to run. And some people might think that casters make millions a year, but they're actually out of their minds. And, while we do make quite a bit of money from YouTube, there are a lot of other things we have to worry about. So this is going to be a long, long process, and I wouldn't expect it to bear fruit immediately.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, yeah, jumping into some more random stuff, but so first thing, how do you like living in the States compared to living in England, between obviously your family, but is there anything else that you miss from home, anything you're glad you don't have to deal with anymore, or things you really like in America, but how you like it in general, I guess?
Well, I'd say the weather, but even like it, I live in North Carolina, so we have weather issues as well. We've got humidity. It's actually getting much better now in the fall, which is wonderful, but we have humidity issues. We have sudden weather changes, big storms and lightning and crazy stuff like that. So weather is more extreme here. I like I'm trying to think I like the fact that there are way more events to get involved in. I would always have to travel to Europe to get involved in anything worthwhile when I was in the UK. So that for me was a nightmare in and of itself. And I hate flying. I still have to fly here in the US as well every now and again, but at least it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like, there's this little ocean, and yet it's going to take me ages to get here, and they probably don't even speak my language. So it's going to be tricky. And in the US, there's a lot of opportunities to grow the business, and that's what I always wanted to do, is to be able to be very deeply involved in the games industry, and living in the US lets you do that. if you have the connections and if you happen to have the media network, which we currently have, being in the US is the best place to be. You get access to all of the best conventions. The only thing you miss out on essentially is Gamescom. So, and even then, PAX is pretty much as good. So, yeah. It's not too much of a worry there. But yeah, I think that's probably what I like most from a business standpoint. From a personal standpoint, obviously I like the fact that I'm back with my family. That's a big deal. But I like the food. You know, it's much better than the UK. The UK food sucks. The only thing we've got that's good is curry and fish and chips. And while I do miss a good curry, at least I can get one if I go to San Francisco, I can get one. So, you know, if I'm over on the West Coast, then I can pick up one anyway.
Oh, and when I was back in England, I lived there for 3 years, but it was fish and chips 6 days a week, and then Sunday roast on Sunday, and that was my life.
I'm very surprised that you're not dead.
Yeah, no, my parents probably are too.
It's a cardiac arrest waiting to happen right there.
Just a little bit. All right, so yeah, so obviously your main body of work is not StarCraft. You do a lot of game content on YouTube. It's just any sort of game really. So you tested out like a ton of games. What are your favorites? Couple of favorites you have from the last month or so, and why?
Last month or so, right? Okay, well let's see what springs to mind. It's always bad for me to remember what games that I played over the last few months because I played so many. There are days when I play 6 different games and they're all new. So I'm like, what is going on? But I think the thing which I really got into, and it's actually a game that I finished, which is very rare for me. I usually don't have the time. Is Transformers: Fall of Cybertron, which is surprisingly good. I was never into Transformers as a kid. So what really surprised me with the original War for Cybertron is that it was so much fun even if you didn't know anything about Transformers. Like, I know who Optimus Prime is and I know who Megatron is, but the game itself is a really nicely varied and incredibly well put together third-person shooter. And it projects a love for the franchise to the point where even if you're not into it, you get suckered in. It's just... It's tenacious. It attracts you in, and it really gets you enthusiastic about something. It's infectious in its enthusiasm for the genre. So I'm a big fan of that. Other games that I played that were absolutely fantastic. Ftl Faster Than Light is
that's a time killer right there.
Oh god, it is. Yeah, I've been looking for a game like that for a very, very long time. It's very much a game that does simulate the whole idea of commanding a starship and flying through the universe and managing a crew better than most games that are out there. And hell, you know, I would give my right arm for a Star Trek game like that. I really would.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it looks like we'll probably never see that. And aside from that, I've been playing a lot of and really enjoying the beta for PlanetSide 2, of course, which is looking to be incredible. And I just don't have the time to play it as much as I wish I could, you know? Back in the day, I was able to put 5-6 hours a day into it, not anymore.
Yeah. So, as far as like each week goes, what's the usual division of time like between work and then like StarCraft's obviously in the back burner, but like StarCraft and free time and anything, like is it like just all work all day and then like a little bit of free time, or what's your day like?
It varies on a day-to-day basis, but it is mostly work. I always have this attitude that if I work now, I can maybe play later, and that doesn't always work out the way that it should. I've been having to really learn since I've now come back to the US how to properly manage time, and Jen is teaching me how to do that. When I was back in the UK, I would just work because why not? You know, I have nothing better to do with my life. I might as well just work my ass off and make a bunch of money. But now I've got a family to deal with, and I do need to de-stress. You know, I've had stress-induced allergies for the past year. I've had bad things have happened to my body as a result of stress, as they tend to. So I've been working to try and limit the amount that I actually work on a daily basis. But I will minimum work an 8-hour day. More often than not, it's 11 to 12. It really depends on the day and how much content I've got going. But lately, I've been able to get into this kind of mindset where I've been able to crack out video after video. Like, I can work for 5-6 hours straight doing nothing but commentary. And then suddenly I've got a lot of content and I can kind of ease off over the next few days, which this is something I was never able to do because I was never able to get into the right mindset, and I was always pretty depressed, honestly, because of the family situation. So now that's been resolved, I've got a more positive mindset, and I'm able to work in a bit of a better way. But it's not easy. You know, I think that the minority of the time is commentary. Everything else is editing. It's dealing with the business side of things, and there is so much to deal with to actually set up all of these opportunities. We do so much with pre-release games, and that takes a lot of work to get copies of those games and get access to stuff and convince developers that we're not going to bite their head off if they give us pre-release code. So it's, there's a lot more to the business than meets the eye.
Yeah. And okay, so as far as so getting into the career that you're in now, obviously it took years to build your brand and your name and the number of subscribers that you have at this point in time. But if there's anyone looking to sort of get into the same sort of thing you're doing, do you have any starting tips for them? Obviously it's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of time, but a good way to start.
Well, the thing you've got to understand about YouTube is that YouTube in its current form is entirely personality driven. You look at some of the videos on YouTube, you look at, say, Happy Wheels Part 167 that has 500,000 views by some guy whose name I will not utter here because it might summon the denizens of hell itself. And you say, well, why the hell? And then what you've got to then turn around and understand is, the reason why is people watch this because of his personality, and that's it. That's the only reason. He could produce anything. Absolutely anything, as long as it actually involves his personality in some way, and people will watch it. If you have a boring personality, fix that. No one will like you. Nobody. Either you've got to create a persona for yourself, or you've just got to make yourself more interesting in some way. For me, I think it was probably because I have an unusual accent. I have an accent it's very rare in the UK to sound like this. It's not impossible. I mean, my dad sounds exactly like this, for instance, only, 20, 30 years older. And there are other people that I've met that do sound like this, but it's quite a rare accent to the point where some people think I fake it, which is kind of crazy. Apparently, I've been faking an accent for the last 10 years. Who knew, But that's, I think, what gets people into me initially is they hear my accent and they're interested by it, and then they find other aspects of my personality which interest them and keep them coming. So that's the first thing. You must have a personality. And secondly, what I would say is consistency. Find what works for your brand and then make it over and over and over again until people can't live without it. That's what I think WTF is attained, and that's by far my most successful series. And that's the bread and butter of the channel. That's what brings people to it. It's constant content. It can't run out because there's always new games coming out. So you've got to come up with a set of series which can actually maintain over the long term and will get people into it to the point where they become reliant on you. And once they become reliant on you, that's when you've got them. That's when you have success, because they come to you on a daily basis. It's like, the comparison I would make is so many people in the UK sit down on an evening to watch the soaps. They watch EastEnders and Coronation Street. It's an integral part of their life. They can't live without it. They want to watch it every day. You've got to build your channel in the same way. You've got to have people say, I want you to be a regular part of my daily routine.
Right on. Okay, I think that's pretty much all I have, so let's do a couple of closing things. What events, StarCraft or otherwise, will you be attending in the next few months where people could potentially meet you?
Well, that's really hard to announce because all of those places, I'm confirmed for a lot of different events, but all of them like to do the whole pre-release hype, so they always announce all their casters at once. All the MLGs and the IPLs and things do that, but let me just say that I will be at several major US events over the next few months, and if you happen to be attending a major US event, the chances are I will be there.
Awesome. Okay, and that's actually all I've got. So if you have any shout outs or other announcements or basically anything else you want to say, the floor is all yours.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I'd like to say is a massive thank you to Jen, who once again is the reason why this business exists. She is a core part of it. She is the only reason why we're even as successful as we are. So a huge thanks to her. And of course, I'm really looking forward to working with her to put this team together and see how it actually goes forward. I'd like to give a big thanks, of course, to Husky, who without him, none of this would have been possible. He's the one who got me my YouTube partnership and really supported me through the early days, and he saved our asses. So I'm forever grateful to him. And as many people have pointed out, I have a little bit of a rage button when anyone attacks that guy. So do beware. I'm a bit of a loyal watchdog in that regard. But big thanks to everyone that continues to support the channel. I really don't like the dumb fanboys, but I know that the vast majority of people aren't. So the guys that stick around and the guys that are reasonable and have cool opinions and like to discuss things without degenerating into tears and fits of rage, you guys are cool. Like you're cool. Everyone else can go away. And I'd like to remind people that my content is always available. We update on a daily basis, brand new videos every day of the week over on YouTube. We've got youtube.com/cynicalbrit, and my StarCraft content, which is a little bit more intermittent. That includes my live streams, I Suck at Heart of the Swarm, and Shoutcraft casts are over on youtube.com/TotalBiscuit. And last but by no means least, I like to point out to teams and StarCraft players, if you want your replays cast for Heart of the Swarm and you wish us to use the virtual jersey system that we're just trialing on the channel now, you can do that. Feel free to email all of your replays through to the Murloc, that is the MURLOC @gmail.com, the Murloc @gmail.com. Send your Heart of the Swarm replay files if you happen to be a pro player, and if you've got some cool casts, then we shall put them on the channel.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks again so much for doing this. This is a
No
pretty,
problem at all.
actually really good interview. Thank you.